We're here. We made it. Welcome to the Christopher Lafayette podcast show. I'm so happy to have our guest today, Genea Barnes. She comes to us from the East Coast. There's a lot that we have to explore. But before that, Genea, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Indeed. Let's chop wood.
All right.
Tell me about Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Well, right now I live in Bed-Stuy, which is a neighborhood that is predominantly black and gentrifying. And I have to say, through the time of this pandemic time, I have been so grateful to be here in my neighborhood. It is very different than when I lived in San Francisco. People in my neighborhood are so friendly. They say hello and they smile at you. I feel so fortunate to feel so welcome in my neighborhood. I've been here for quite some time now. And I just feel a sense of community here. And I think that was something that was missing for me a lot on the West Coast. So I'm happy to be here. It's home. It's New York has always been the only place that ever felt like home to me, and when it finally made it home, it just felt like walking into a warm hug.
Indeed. And for our audience listening, we're here at the Christopher Lafayette podcast show. We're very culture centric, where our guests not only tell us about the wood that they're chopping, but the inspirations that have come along the way. With that, and we will get back to New York, who's Genea Barnes?
Who is Genea Barnes? Well, I am a woman that has worn many hats, and most of those hats were not fully, truly who I am. And now, after a long, long journey of healing all the stuff that got in my way, I finally get to step into and be who I really am. And I'm reminded of a time when I was 3 years old. And it took till I was 40 before I remembered this time. And I was on the front porch and I was drawing like a whole new world in front of me. And I felt really, truly who I was. I could feel my inner strength. I could feel my inner power. I knew that I was here to help people, and I could just touch all the possibilities at my fingertips. And then over the course of my life, like I think many people, little things chopped me down one by one by one. And I lost touch of everything that I am inside and how big and connected to everything we all really are. And so, on my journey of finding my way back to that person with a whole bunch of learnings and new resources to pile on that 3 year old, I get to actually be here to facilitate my purpose, which is to see that which is unseen and to help make people's lives easier. I get to help people do the journey that I did much quicker, much easier, and really get to help make people's lives easier. And it just fills me up every day.
Genea, from your expertise and from your lens perspective, what is the state of mental health for many in this present time, in the time of work? And audience, let's take a little recap of where we are this past 18, almost 19 months, that from quarantine to yet still being here in a pandemic to a remote world and dealing with the place of work that's become hybrid, where people are doing things in their living rooms as what they're accustomed to doing in the office. The dynamics have certainly changed, and by many accounts, we're not going back. Much has changed, I imagine, in a state of wellness. Genea, what does that look like and what are you seeing?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I am an unconscious mind expert and I work with people specifically to reprogram what's underneath. And a lot of our programming happened when we were little. And what we do, what the unconscious mind does, its number one objective is to keep the body safe. And whenever we have overwhelming emotions, it registers to the nervous system as trauma. And what happens here is, unless we complete a full fight and flight cycle, which means if you've ever watched animal shows, you see the cheetah chase after the antelope and the antelope runs, and when the antelope is safe, they shake it off, they release that energy. But we as human beings, we hold that energy in ourselves most of the time. You know, when the coaches would always say shake it off, shake it off, there's a reason for that, because it clears the emotions out of your nervous system. So anytime we are overwhelmed, we end up with emotions that are stuck, that get anchored into our nervous system. This creates a trigger point. And what we do, our unconscious mind works so fast. Like if you think about the Nike swoosh, for example, if you just see the swoosh, you know exactly that it's Nike. You can't even try to make yourself think something different. It happens so quick and so fast, it's like you have no control. And so our unconscious mind works that fast to protect us. So it's trying to avoid any kind of little trigger point where we've got these unprocessed emotions. So we go about our lives consciously and unconsciously, setting up our life to avoid these trigger points. Like an example of how you would know that you were doing that consciously, like maybe there's a cashier at one store that's kind of a jerk, so you consciously avoid that store. And so that's a way. But when we've got things that are a little bit more triggering than just that, our unconscious mind is doing everything it can to direct us away. And the last 18 months, what has happened? We've had every little structure we put in place to keep ourselves safe from our little trigger points has crumbled. And now it's like we're sitting there bouncing off of all of these things that we've programmed and created our life to avoid. So there's a beauty in this, because things that have been below the surface, that have always needed to be cleared out of our nervous system and healed, have been brought to the surface for potential healing. And then on the other side of it, we're feeling triggered everywhere we go, and it's super stressful and really difficult for a lot of people that haven't been doing the work of trying to heal that stuff prior to all their structures coming down.
Let's go back.
Yeah.
Let's let's go pick up some story. Let's talk about experiences.
Mm-hmm.
No one certainly rolls out of bed one day and says, "This is the type of work that I'm going to do." I, I won't believe it. Genea, I believe there's some experiences that help shape and mold, that help guide to get you to where you're at, to where we're all at. Let's go back. When did it begin for you? When did this journey of healing, of better understanding, of identifying within, when did this begin for you, and when did you feel capable of sharing it with others?
Well, I mean, we really need to go back almost to the beginning. So, remember, I said I was 3 years old on the porch and I felt really good. It felt so good to be me. And that was pretty much before anything negative had really happened to me. I mean, my dad took off when I was 2 months old, and I have a memory of him saying goodbye to me. Um, so that I guess would be the first traumatic event, but my life was layered with many, many traumas. Some of them I remembered, and some of them I didn't. Another thing your unconscious mind does is it will repress memories if you do not have the resources to handle them. And at 4 years old, my best friend was a Vietnam vet and a junkie, and he lived up the street. My mom wasn't really paying too much attention. She thought he was a little boy that lived up the street. And I went up there one day and he was struggling. He was trying to quit the heroin and he was going through withdrawal. And I really wanted to help him. And he told me there was nothing I could do, that I should just go home. He said that he really wanted something sweet, which anybody that knows people going through heroin withdrawal, they want candy. And he said that he felt like he was going to die. And I was so overwhelmed with emotion. And when we're overwhelmed with emotion, all kinds of things happen. Again, I said earlier, it creates those trigger points. And I was thinking to myself, well, I can save him because I heard what I heard because I was so overwhelmed. I heard that he was going to die unless he got something sweet. And I was like, I can get the sugar from the house. And so I ran home and I jumped up on the counter and looking for the sugar. And my mom came in. She was like, Genea, what are you doing? And I was hysterical. I was trying to explain to her that Carl was going to die unless he got some sugar. But through my hysteria, she heard that he was going to take his life unless I brought him some food. And remember, she thought he was a little boy that lived up the street. So, in this moment where my emotions were so spiked, I she sat me down and said, that boy's trying to manipulate you. So when your emotions are really high, you can be brainwashed. It's how a lot of people brainwash. It's even in the commercials, they get your emotions going and then they drop the product placement. So I thought, she sits me down and says that boy's trying to manipulate you. So that anchored into my neurology a belief that people manipulate. And then a couple days later, I woke up in the middle of the night and I knew something was wrong. And I ran out of the house, ran up the street, and I found Carl. He had just overdosed. I didn't realize it at the time, but I held his hand while he passed away. And it was very sweet. As I look at it now from a healed perspective, he looked up at me and he said, Genea, you are magic. And those were his last words. And now, because I have healed the emotions from the event, I can actually look at that as a beautiful moment between a little girl and a person that she loved and adored. We used to sing songs and play the guitar, things like that. Joyful relationship. And but what also happened, because the event was so overwhelming, I chose to believe that my mom cannot be trusted because he died anyway. I chose to believe that I had to find another way. Whatever was told to me, I had to find another way. And I kept my mom at arm's length. I had many traumas after that, but I never let my mom know about any of them because I didn't feel like she could be trusted because of that event. And so that shaped my life. It shaped my life keeping people at arm's length. It made me always tracking for how people were going to manipulate me. So these things were anchored into my neurology. And even though I didn't remember all of that until 2012, it's still in my unconscious. So it still was anytime you're sick, tired, depleted, intoxicated, your unconscious mind takes over. We've all had that experience where you're driving home and you're like, whoa, wait, I don't even remember driving home. Your unconscious is running the show. And so from there, I went about my life, and, a number of other things happened to me. Babysitters, kids tied me up, locked me in the closet, left me overnight multiple times. I was almost abducted 3 times before the age of 8 and sexually assaulted twice before the age of 8 also. So all of that stuff sort of stacked on. Some of the stuff I remembered, some of it didn't. And I spent my life really trying to be happy. And I put on a really good face. But inside it, I knew something was off. I was always trying to do better, feel better, figure out something. I was trying to study people, understand why people did the things they did so I could figure out what was going on with me. At 12, I was suicidal. I tried a handful of times. At 15, my mom and I got into a physical fight, and I moved out of the house and almost took my life. And then, got into my 20s. I bartended, so I got to really observe everybody at every different level of consciousness. And I did, the things that you're supposed to do when you don't feel so good inside. You go to therapy, right? That's what most of us know. But it didn't, I understood, I guess, a little more. We uncovered some mommy issues with my first therapist, but it didn't fix my problems. So I kept seeking because I just knew I knew that there had to be a way to feel better. So I kept seeking and I kept seeking. I had a really great yoga teacher that helped me feel better in my body. So that was great. And I worked with a couple of fantastic body workers as well. And anybody that's experienced a lot of trauma knows that you store that in your body. So these were the first things that were starting to shift and move some of that stuff out of my body, like the antelope when they're shaking that trauma out, or that fight and flight response. So that was kind of the beginning. At age 28, I chose, after a breakup, or 27, I chose to feel my feelings for the first time. I had stuffed them all, which of course is, adding more and more of that trauma into the body. And most of us are not taught how to feel our emotions. Let's face it. We have, you know, stereotypically, genders like men are not supposed to feel sadness and women are not supposed to feel angry, and it doesn't matter what the emotion is. If we're stuffing it in our body, it's creating a toll on our body. This kind of stuff leads to illness and disease over time. And then I started doing all the things. I did shamanic healings. I did transformational workshops. I sat ayahuasca ceremonies. I did kambo, which is another Amazonian medicine. I was just chasing and chasing anything to make me feel better, because I knew, especially after I had that memory of me at 3 years old, which happened around age 40, that really told me that it was possible to feel better. Because before I had that memory, I really couldn't remember what it felt like to feel good in my body. And you just kind of go about life and not understanding that there's more if you've felt that way your whole life, or it feels like you felt like that your whole life. And then little by little, things started to work. And the stuff that started to work was the stuff that transformed the unconscious mind. The ayahuasca ceremonies healed some trauma. And what happens when you do psychedelics is it softens the default mode network in the brain, which allows your viewpoint to become more expanded. If anybody's ever taken mushrooms or done acid or something, there's that part when you first start to come on and you look at the world and it looks brighter and bigger. And that's because the default mode network, which is sort of the thing that takes into account everything you've ever been through and is trying to keep you away from all those trigger points. And so it's narrowing your focus really to check for the possible dangers. And when you take psychedelics, it opens your perspective so you can see beyond just what you've been filtering for, because your unconscious mind takes in 11 million bits of information per second, and your conscious mind only registers 40 to 50 of those bits, which is a huge thing. So it's filtered through your beliefs, through your experiences, through your values, through which things are anchored in your neurology. And then the stuff that really worked in a different way but transformed the unconscious mind was NLP and hypnotherapy, because you bypass that default mode network and you can actually get into the unconscious mind and start to make the shifts. A lot of my programming was all about avoiding all of the little things well, I guess they were bigger things, all the big things that had happened to me. But not my whole life, and not everybody around me is out to manipulate me or is out to hurt me. And so as I got to kind of start to direct what I was working on. With psychedelics, you don't really direct what you're working on. But for me, I was like, oh, well, I'm having this issue. I'm having this problem. Okay, I'm going to do the work and focus it. And that's why I love what I do, because I get to create and heal those triggering anchor points, get to process the emotions so that the fight and flight response is not in the body anymore. And we get to choose what we work on. So as my life got easier and easier and just felt like I could breathe, I grew up not feeling safe. And so I can walk through unsafe situations and I still notice everything. Your unconscious mind is picking up 11 million bits of information, or your mind is. And so I'm going to see it if it's crazy, if it's like intense or a threat, but I'm not scrutinizing every single person like, wait, how are you going to be a threat to me? How are you going to be a threat to me? And that it narrows everything. It keeps you very contracted. It keeps you in survival mode. And how can you create when you're in survival mode? You can't, because you're so worried about what you don't want to happen that you can't actually put any energy towards what you want to happen. Does that make sense? That was long-winded.
It was well stated. I know that in a lot of ways of your experience there's been healing, but I still think it's appropriate to say that I'm so sorry that you experienced many of the things that you did. I'm quite frankly touched by the given resiliency to even be able to have some type of testimony to be able to share with all of us. Let's go to the other side of things. Let's talk about healing.
All
let's,
right.
let's talk about healing. For those that are sitting out in the audience today listening to us, today's listeners and future listeners, what does the start of that path look like of healing from your lens?
From my lens, it's interesting because I went, like I said, I did all of the things. And now, knowing what I know now, this is what I would say for anybody that wants to start their path of healing. Obviously, work with somebody like me if you can. And if you can't, the first thing that we all need to do is learn how to let our emotions move through us. Learn how to actually feel our emotions, because that's the stuff that's getting anchored and creating those triggers. So one way that you can heal for free, if if you don't have any other resources, it takes a little longer, and it's a little bit like doing the psychedelics. You don't get to choose what heals, but you can trust that every time this happens, you are healing. So everyone's talking about mindfulness these days and meditation, and everyone, I hear people say it all the time, I can't meditate, I don't know how to meditate. Or they say, I can't sit still. There's a reason you can't sit still. It's because your nervous system is on edge and in fight and flight. But here's all you have to do. Don't worry about what your brain's doing. Leave all that away. Just sit with your eyes closed. You can listen to some ambient music. If you really, really want to dive into healing yourself, work your way up to 2 hours a day. I did 2 hours a day for a number of years. And if not, that's okay. But what happens, those moments, the people that tell me that they can't sit still, what you need to do, and this is the most important piece of meditating, it's not whether your mind is perfectly clear or whatever, it's the moment that you feel uncomfortable and you want to get up, whatever you do, stay there. That feeling, that uncomfortable feeling, is only going to last for a couple of minutes. I promise you, unless you start feeding it a story and saying, like, why do I feel this way? What's wrong with me? Or da da da, then you're going to signal new emotions to roll through your body. But you're going to allow that emotion to just move through you, because what it is it's an emotion that's been trapped in your body and it's now come up for releasing. And the chemical response of an emotion lasts for 90 seconds. If it lasts for longer than that, maybe say 2 minutes, then you're feeding it some sort of story that's creating a new set of chemicals to move through your body. And what you do in those times when you're sitting, you're practicing sitting, I like to call it sitting instead of meditating, is you are every time you sit and get to the other side of that uncomfortable feeling, you are training your nervous system that you're not going to die. And what that does is it begins to realize that, oh, I can have these feelings and it's not a threat in my life. You're training your nervous system that you're safe when you have an emotion. So some people that are really like bouncing all over the place with their emotions and they've got a lot of anxiety and a lot of that, this is so important, because every time you sit through one of those, you're training your nervous system little by little that you're not going to die, and you're allowing those trigger points to move out of your body. It also teaches you what it feels like to allow an emotion to actually move through your body. We talk about, like, anger and anxiety are secondary emotions. They are usually a culmination of a buildup of other things, and then it gets so big that it comes out in anger or anxiety. And so that would be the thing I would say. If you have no resources beyond just yourself, that's the best thing you can do for yourself. Sit and let your body knows how to heal itself. We do not give ourselves, our bodies, enough time and space to heal. And then, of course, any kind of work that you do that's going to get into the unconscious mind. People talk about doing affirmations all the time, which is great because it changes your state in the moment. If you're feeling really terrible in the moment, you can say, like, I am powerful, I am strong, and all these beautiful affirmations, but they're not getting into your unconscious mind. They're not shifting you at the unconscious level. So it will change your state, but it doesn't shift you at the unconscious level. And when you shift at the unconscious level, that's where the real change happens. Have you ever had a moment where you used to do something and then all of a sudden it just like clicked and you just didn't do it anymore. You might have been working on it for a while, but then just all of a sudden it just clicks, and it's done. It's like you're done. You just never want to do that negative thing again. For me, that happened with smoking, and I spent 8 years quitting smoking. But once your unconscious mind gets that it's not going to get the thing that it really wants through the action, it's done. It's done. So for me, I used smoking as a form of connection. And then I lost my voice for 10 days because of smoking. And then my unconscious mind was like, well, she can't connect if she can't talk. So we're done with this crap. So you want to, whatever you do, anything you can do that's going to work on shifting the unconscious mind is going to be the most powerful thing. You want to get those things out of your neurology, and that's all in your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind is the part that's, causing you to breathe. It's keeping your heart rate at a certain state. So the more of these events you get out of your neurology, the easier and smoother everything goes. And you stop doing the things that aren't in your highest good.
I have to ask,
Yeah.
with a little bit of time that we have left, I have to ask. For the audience listening, I know that you've been edified thus far in what Genea has shared with us. But she also has a history of capturing moments, photography, of capturing scenes. As my last question for you today, tell us about ghost bikes.
The unconscious mind is a powerful thing. So I saw my first ghost bike in New York in 2010, maybe. And for those of you that don't know, ghost bikes are bicycles that are painted white and locked to an intersection where a cyclist was killed. A bicyclist was killed. And when the first one I saw, it struck me so strongly. And I didn't really understand. I mean, I rode a bicycle. It was my main forms of transportation, but I was not one of those bicycle geeks. I was not like super into it. But I did this whole photo project. I traveled the country photographing ghost bikes. And I just got chills. I don't think I've actually talked with anyone about this, really. It was on that trip. I drove over 6,000 miles, 27 days, I think. I went to like 45 different cities. I sought out 120 something ghost bikes. I only found like maybe 60 of them. I photographed them all. I went by myself, so there was a lot of quiet time, a lot of that, sitting. And stuff started to come up for me. I found myself on that trip. I photographed everything that was related to death. I've photographed roadkill. I photographed cemeteries. I photographed ghost bikes, and I photographed dilapidated buildings. I did not want to photograph anything else. Anything pretty and it was pretty to me, but anything, very light and happy, I was not about it. And during that trip, I would be driving, and all of a sudden I would start to cry uncontrollably, so intensely that I almost had to pull over numerous times, and it just kept happening and happening, and I started to get flashes of memories. So this was actually when I started remembering Carl. And I went through the process afterwards. I chased those memories down. This is really important, you guys. If you ever start having flashes of a repressed memory, do not chase them. Your unconscious mind will give you what you have the resources to process at the time. So allow whatever to come, and don't go chasing it. I chased it. I chased it and relived it over and over and over and re traumatized myself over and over and over again. But that being said, the trip itself was powerfully healing in a way that I didn't even understand yet. And my unconscious mind was obviously leaning me in to explore a subject that I had some buried deep down inside of me. And, it's interesting. I think about the people in my family that have passed away my whole life. I never felt anything when they passed because that first trauma was locked in my body so tight that if I were to allow any feelings around other people losing their life, that it would trigger potentially that trauma that I wasn't quite ready to deal with yet. So, yeah, I photographed ghost bikes, but before that, I photographed people. And I loved being able to see into people's soul through a photograph and be able to see the pain. It was a mirror of my pain. But I look at all the different pieces and all the different things that just like build like my fascination with people and understanding them when I was little and trying to help people when I was little, and then photographing people and really wanting to understand what was underneath, and then working as a bartender for a lot of years as well, like dealing with what was underneath the conscious mind when people were intoxicated, and then finally getting the healing that I had always wanted, and then studying it so I could bring to others. It was all like a divine path, if you will. And I feel, I appreciate the sentiment of when you said that you're sorry that I had to go through all of that. But I am so, so grateful because my web was very complicated in my unconscious mind, and unwinding all of that it was a journey, but it has given me really deep insight in being able to pull people from where they are to where they want to go. They say you can only take people as far as you have gone. And I don't know if somebody that hadn't been through a lot would have been able to hold the space in my healing. And so I'm grateful that I can hold the space for just about anybody, whatever comes up, because of going through everything that I went through. So I have so much gratitude for my life.
You can only take people as far as you've gone. What a remarkable thing to say. Audience, you've heard it here. You've heard a share, a small share, that took years in the making. Genea Barnes, thank you for joining us on the Christopher Lafayette podcast show.
Thank you so much. It has
To our
been
audience,
my honor.
the pleasure is ours. To our audience, thank you for journeying with us and exploring in the world of Genea Barnes here at the Christopher Lafayette podcast show. We hope that you're keeping safe and well. There's a lot to consider, and we look forward to exploring with you again.